I've got Larry Hoyt with CTR Mortgage Brokers in Charlotte, who consistently closes double digits month in, month out, even in this market, who's primarily focused on the Latino community in and around the Charlotte area and just doing a bang up job there. And then I've got Thais Marineli. I said the one thing that I wasn't going to mess up.
I know.
We also have Thais Marineli, who is
Yes.
the owner of Simple Connect Processing. Is that it?
Simple Processing Connect.
Simple Processing Connect. See, I've got dyslexia, so I flip things around.
Yes.
Where they're a third-party processing company. You guys are in what? North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida. Where else are you?
In Texas.
And Texas. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And your claim to fame, as far as I see it, you guys are trilingual. Is that
Yes.
just 3 languages?
Yeah. So I'm Brazilian, and
Okay.
I learned Spanish, and my team, both of my teammates, Portuguese and Spanish, and I have a English only processor.
And do you have, just out of curiosity, do you have like a main, like what is the language you prefer to speak? If you got to pick all 3, which would be the one that you would prefer to speak in?
I honestly would prefer to do it in English, because
Okay.
in mortgages, there's such a terms that you can translate. So
Okay.
it's a Spanglish, because we were always talking in Spanish, and there's certain things that you can only explain in English, but I'm cool with either.
Got it. What's the weirdest one that like throws people off the most? Like there's a word, it just doesn't equate.
Equity. I don't know how to explain that in another languages.
Okay.
Without explaining the whole story and drawing, and this is equity. It's a word that doesn't have a translation. Not that no.
Even mortgage doesn't really translate correctly from English to Spanish.
Okay. Interesting. See, I don't pretend to even know things. And often like these conversations go, it's pretty interesting. And a lot of people will pretend like I know very little about what it is to like, I've done a handful of loans that were Spanish speaking over my entire career. And almost all the time, right? Like you were going through this translator and it was just a terrible experience. So you just stayed away from them. But right now, as I look at kind of the demographics of the US, right? Roughly 20% of the population is, is Latino, Hispanic. We'll get a definition of actually what's the difference between the two, but it's the fastest growing segment, right? That population group over the last 10 years has seen a bigger gain in home ownership than anyone else. There are a ton of people in that 20 to 35-year-old range, age group inside of that demographic that are becoming homeowners, different things. And you see the media all the time. There's a lot of talk of, and they kind of lump it together, which I don't think is fair. I have not experienced this, but they'll lump together minorities and low income, where most of the minorities, they're not one and the same, right? I know a lot of low income white people. I know a lot of low income, right? It's like across the board, yet the headline always lumps those together. So maybe we can talk about that as well, because I think it's BS, but right, what do I know? So just tell me a little bit, like Larry, and I know like you and I have had a relationship now. I've known you for, I don't know, 6-9 months, I guess. And when I first, met you and you were telling me about the business you were doing and how many loans you were closing in this market, and I asked, like, what are you doing? Like, who are you going after? And you're like, well, I primarily deal with this, I do a lot of ITIN loans. I do a lot of, loans for, Hispanic people. And I've kind of created a niche for myself here in this market. Can you just tell me like a little bit about like your business plan? And I don't even know if it was by design or if you stumbled into it. Like, how did you end up being that guy in Charlotte?
So, it's a good question. When I first started, I didn't have any sphere of influence. I didn't have any friends here. We had just moved to North Carolina in June, and I got licensed in October 2018, I believe. And my thing was reach out to realtors and let them know I'm a mortgage broker and there's things I can do that their preferred lender might say no to. So my opening was always what's the minimum down payment, the minimum credit score for FHA, and the realtors would say, oh, 620. I say, well, that's wrong. They're like, no, the guy at my office, he's, they said it's 620 and up. Like, great, that's what your in-house lender can do. Is they're a lender. They put their own overlay on top of the guidelines. It actually goes down to 500. So that was always my opening line. And I'd be like, so if he's telling you you can't do this, like what other homes that are you leaving on the table? What opportunities are you missing? So I started getting a lot of people with bad credit. That was, the first 2, 3 months. And then out of nowhere, I learned how to do rescores, rapid rescores, and all that stuff, and get everybody. I started closing
Right.
loans, and my name started spreading more. And out of nowhere, all of my clients shifted to people who didn't speak English,
Okay.
because they were being told no. So they're like, oh well, let's give this guy a shot. And in the beginning, we didn't have her company, and I was brand new. I wasn't really that busy. So since she spoke Spanish and Portuguese, and we started meeting a lot of Brazilian people, um, she became my loan officer assistant.
Okay.
She could take the application in Spanish or in Portuguese. She can collect all the documents. She would do all the talking. Um, and I would just make sure that we fit the guidelines and everything and got the right products, and we started growing. And then not only was she my LOA, she also started processing my loans then too, because that's another thing where there are a lot of Spanish speaking loan officers, but once you get past the loan officer, you're back to people who don't speak Spanish again.
Yep.
And they reach out to the realtor, and the realtor has to translate and do the lender's job when they're trying to get more business so they can support their families or whatever they're trying to do. So that's where we kind of came up with her company was, well, I'm not the only loan officer that has Spanish speaking or Portuguese speaking clients. So she, later on, once she got comfortable and pretty much mastered the processing uh game, she opened up her company. Now she can help other brokers who have the same issue. They need someone who can process their loans, um, that speaks the language. So
Right.
it frees up the loan officer's time and it keeps the realtor free. So you know, that's how my business grew, is that I made the workload easier for the realtor. And also being a broker and reaching out to the right outlets and the right lenders to register with, to know, like, I see it all the time. You see people all the time out there, lenders, yeah, we do I-10, 10% down. Do I-10, 5% down. And then, I'll call that lender, I'll vet them, oh, so what do I need? And they'll say, oh, you need, a state ID and a valid visa. They wouldn't have a tax ID if they had a valid visa. So people get true I-10, people who are here undocumented, they get that mixed up with foreign nationals who are investors that live outside of the country who may or may not have an I-10 number, but they have a visa to legally enter the country. Um, but so that was just knowing how to just knowing my products, knowing my guidelines. I'm not going to do a loan a loan product that I don't know. And I studied them and I learned which work permits we can do, which ones. There's a TPS, it's an expired ID since 2019. Lenders are turning it down, saying, nope, you can't get a mortgage because you have an expired ID. I close one of those probably every 2 months.
So I like to call it the language of loans, the LOL.
That's what I
And
always say.
and the language of loans varies. It's not Fannie and Freddie. There's Fannie and Freddie. That's like your ABCs. And then you've got all of these, there's Hemingway. Hemingway is one thing, right? I can't probably Longfellow. I don't know other poets, but there's all these other language of loans
Yeah.
that a lot of people just miss out on.
Yep.
Or there's a lot of pretenders out there that are claiming to be able to do them, and then they get a bad experience and it doesn't work. So I think that's,
I hear
really
that a lot with DSCRs. That's another big loan that I do, and I do a lot of them. People will say, like, DSCR, no, they take too long. They don't close. They're really expensive. But they close fast and they're pricing better than a full doc conventional.
Yeah. And I think that it's being able to handle what comes your way. And again,
Yeah.
another, I think just synergy that you guys have is that, well, one, you're married, right, which creates like a synergy. But then
Yeah.
beyond that, your processing team actually understands those products as well. Because if
Correct.
you can understand it, if you're handing it off to a processor that doesn't, at the end of the day, you run into the same problem. You're now playing referee on everything,
Right.
and you get stuck in the weeds, or your agent does. So I think that's awesome, and it's a super cool business model. And like I said, when you and I first talked and you told me how many loans you'd closed in the last year, I thought like you must have messed it up, or you had like some massive team of people. Like, I was blown away that an individual in this market was closing that many loans.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. I do have 2 loan officer assistants, but there's nobody writing mortgages in my name. It's just me.
they're not out selling loans and just closing them in your. It's not like the guaranteed rate thing where there's 30 loan officers writing loans in one
Yeah.
person's thing and they do $1 billion in production.
And they're all the VP of lending.
Hey, I was wondering if you could do me a solid. If you're listening to this, you're probably taking something away from it, finding the content valuable. And you probably know someone else that could also benefit from the content. So if you could do us a favor and forward this on to them, that would be awesome. We greatly appreciate it. And if you want to do a little bit deeper and take a deeper dive into your business and see if there's not some simple solutions out there to help you go from where you are to where you want to go, set up a call. There's a link someplace here for you to go ahead, get on our calendar. We'd love to talk to you and see how we can possibly work together or do more together. Thank you very much. Let it roll. So I just have some like just basic kind of questions for you. So you guys do a really good job. Lots of 5-star reviews. Larry's got 5,000 plus followers. Every one of your clients, I see you posting photos, closings. There's lots of happy smiling faces. Like, the area of Charlotte has a lot of happy families, and I just see like salt of the earth, hardworking people. There's a dad that spent 12 hours at a job. He's showing up. Mom's happy. The kids are happy, and you guys are like, I like to say the American dream is that of home ownership, right? And being able to graze your family the way you want. And you guys are clearly facilitating that. So kudos to you.
So helping with building that generational wealth, building up the wealth, as we know that homeowners' net worth is 40 times more than a renter. So that's a huge thing, especially when you're dealing with people who migrated here to have a better life, and then you get to help them. They get here. That's hard. Just
right.
start. Just to show up in a country, a lot of times you don't know the language. We have a lot of Spanish pockets everywhere, so they do good. But you're making that step to come here to better your life, and you get a job or you start a company, you work hard, you save your money, and then I get to help you with your next step, which is buying a house.
Right.
Which I was one of the first people. I was the first person in my family to buy a house in 2020, and being able to see it firsthand, how much, what changes. My mortgage was less than all the rents that I was paying. The equity in my house value basically doubled over the last 4 years. I've taken out equity and bought several investment properties. It creates a huge wealth advantage owning a house. So I'm happy that I get to help them with that.
Now let me, and I'll just kind of start there. So, inside of, right, I was born here. My mother's from Europe. My dad's like a second generation, right? My whole expectation, everything I've known since day one is, right, you buy a house, there's a mortgage, like there's a certain level of like entitlement that we have, just living here of how things happen, good, bad, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, as you're looking, or, as you come from, or Thais, you came from Brazil, where, like things are very different. There's cities that are, massive amounts larger. Like, what's the like big cultural differences as you come from those countries to here? I know in a lot of countries, like the fact of owning something is just, it's not a reality. Like, your whole life is spent, kind of renting or something small, whatever it is. Like, are there any major cultural differences in the clients that you see, or things that they just have problems comprehending just going, one place to the next?
No, absolutely. I feel like bringing to our industry, the biggest difference is and I don't want to butcher that word, is the bureaucracy.
Yep.
Yes. So I'm going to speak about Brazil. For you to get a loan closed in Brazil when you buy a house, you will probably be looking about 3 to 4 months. And then you get to United States where you can open a company in about 10 minutes. The Secretary of State, you can get a loan fairly quick, 30-day closing. So to me, the easiness of although we know America is work, 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 we work very hard. There's this pressure of consuming and food. There's so much differences culturally, but it's so nice to see things working. It's so nice for you to just get to see that you started working a year, 2 years after you can buy a house. That is a 20 years plan in Brazil for some of the families. For my family, it was 16 years until my mom was able to buy a house. So how fast and how productive and how, just I feel like in here things happen if you're hardworking and if you're willing to take the steps, you're gonna get there. That's 100% sure. It's not a question of, oh, may I get it? No, you're gonna get there.
So I want to kind of elaborate. I want to add to that as well, because this is one thing that I've always said as I was growing up. Um, I grew up in New York, which, you know, I've always said this, I'm the third generation born in this country. So even from a young age, I already had this understanding, I guess, or feeling of immigration, right? My grandmother was the first person in my family born in the United States. And also, in New York, when you ask someone like, "Oh, what are you?" No one says, "I'm white American." They say, "I'm German, I'm Irish, I'm
Right.
Italian, Pole." Like, they go through the whole list of things. They don't say, "Oh, I'm American." Um, so right there, that's in there as well. And there was something that just slipped my mind that I want to say.
Well, maybe it will come back because
Land of opportunity. So, the people that just like working hard and you can get what you want and all that stuff, like that's that's what I see in my buyers and my clients, is that they come they're told that um to quote Barry Habib, that there's money in the streets. um they're told that there's money in the streets. It doesn't mean there's literally money in the streets. It means if you come here and you work and you're a good person and you do what you're supposed to do, it's going to be rewarding eventually. Might not be overnight, it might not be next year, but if you stick to the plan, it can happen here faster than probably anywhere else in the world. So I don't know. I guess that's what I was gonna say, is that you come here like doing the same thing that they're like. I have a lot of friends that moved here from Brazil, and you know, they're doing the same work that they were doing in Brazil, but in Brazil they were like barely getting by. Here the revenue is 7 figures. So
7 figures is impressive. Yeah, I'd like to think of, there's maybe like, and I would write like equality, who knows what that actually is, but there's somewhat of an equal opportunity, maybe not equal outcomes, but if you really put your head down, right, and you're the best that there is, right? Like, I know Messi is not being denied in soccer because he's really damn good at it. And he practiced a ton, right? So like, granted, right? Like, I can't run like I'm not playing in the NBA because I'm not tall enough, but there's a good opportunity that you can do that. My quick question on that though. So a little girl that being born in San Pablo or wherever they're in Brazil today, I, I had a nanny that San Paulo that was from there, and her name's Rita. Love her to death. She's living out in Seattle now. Awesome. But like a little girl being born there today, like do they dream that like I'm gonna like grow up, get a job, buy a house, or is that like kind of just like
I don't know. I've been living here for the past 8 years, and
okay,
like especially after COVID, things changed so much in
sure,
the human being and with social media and everything. And though I'm so young, but I feel disconnected from a little girl that because it just changed a lot what you want to do. I know by my friends and their little cousins or sisters or whatever, it's the empowerment of a woman getting to work. I don't know if getting married and getting kids and getting a house is in the plans. That's from my perspective. But
right.
the agenda is much more like to grow, to go to school, to get a degree, to be a business owner, and that empowerment thing. I feel like that's very strong in Brazil right now, Brazil culture.
So let's get to kind of clients. Is there, so as you go, right, a lot of people will lump in everything from, you know, the Mexico from the border in Mexico all the way to Argentina as, you know, being Latino. Now, is there, for question number one, like I hear things kind of intertwined. Is there a difference between Latino and Hispanic?
There is.
And because, right, it's, and would somebody that's Latino be offended if referred to as Hispanic and vice versa? Or are
So
they somewhat interchangeable?
they're they're only interchangeable to the Latinos that are of Spanish descent.
Okay.
That's where the Hispanic comes from. Because Brazilians are Latinos, they are not Hispanic because they were not they were
And
not
they speak Portuguese.
right, and they were colonized by Portugal, not by Spain.
So thing number
Now,
one
here's a
pointer.
really good one that I get to watch all the time is that Mexicans say that they're neither.
Yeah, and like I said, right, I'm just some, you know, dude from northern Michigan, right? Like I'm way up here in like in the sticks, according, you know, like you see these things intertwined and right, I don't know any better, right?
Yeah,
Like you lump it together and so like anybody that's watching this, like understand that there is a difference between if you're speaking to somebody that's Mexican versus speaking to somebody that's, you know, Argentinian or like try and get to their country of origin and refer to them maybe as that versus trying to put them into this whole other bucket.
right.
And just understand, right? Anybody that's watching this, it was one of my notes that it had to be something that I would see as frustrating if I was right Brazilian. I didn't know you were going to say that, but and you referred to me as, you know, Hispanic. Well, I'm not, like I speak Portuguese. So any other big kind of misconceptions that you think people just they throw like this whole blanket on everything, you know, south of the border in Texas, Arizona that just is like a little bit like you tolerate it, but it's a little bit offensive. Maybe they shouldn't do that.
I
Not
got one
sure.
because for my wife, um, that we get all a lot. Like, oh, like the United States, as we know, we have categories for everything, right?
Yeah.
You're white, black, Latino, Hispanic. You're uh, Pacific Islander, Asian. Like we're on many things. We're all kind of divided. Um, and we're all, like I said earlier, I'm Italian, and I'm Irish, and I'm Dutch, and and when you ask the Brazilians what are they say, I'm Brazilian. Now my wife's bloodline per se, her mother is 100% Italian, her bloodline, but
Right.
her mom, I think, is the third generation to live in Brazil. They just never had children and got married outside of Italian immigrants moving to Brazil. Her father is Afro-Latino, right? So in the U.S., she would be a biracial child, kid, right? And you say like, she's black. Well, here they say, no, she's not black. You're like, she's tan. You can see she has
Right.
African descent. And they say, no, she's Brazilian. She looks Brazilian. I think that's offensive because Brazilians don't have like the U.S. They have blonde hair, white skin, blue eyes, and every color in between, all the way up to dark hair and dark eyes and dark, like,
Yeah, that's like I said, before, I kind of see it as this way. You've got poor people, middle class people, and rich people, and it doesn't really matter. Like they're gonna have, I guess, just in our country today, the way I see it, there's a lot of things that are put in place to create and keep separation.
of
But
course.
like there are people on the left and right that are like 99% the same. I like to look at like vegans and like a pure carnivore. Those two groups have more in common, right? They're all against ultra processed food, being obese. They're all pushing to like be the healthiest versions of them. And
Yeah,
they want to do well and they want to like excel. And yet they're like, they try and separate them, yet their goals are like 92% of the same.
Yeah.
There's 8% different. One chooses to only eat plants and the other one chooses to only eat things that eat the plants. But outside of that, like they're so the same,
Very
yet
cool.
we like to categorize things here and pick on it. It is super weird. So again, right, if you're watching this,
Yeah.
like just because somebody's from Brazil, if their mom and dad were both, first generation from Germany, you're probably going to identify more as being German than Brazilian. My mom's from Holland. She's she moved here when she was 19. And I grew up my entire life with, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. Right. And I eat weird black licorice and put chocolate on bread. So I do all kinds of things that are weird because of, that. And I identify very closely with being Dutch. My wife is Albanian, right? Like, and they got their double eagle and like they're Albanian.
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting. So that's a
And
great thing.
to add to your comment, when you sent the links for the interview, I was reading the headlines, the news, and it was one of them was saying the minority are behind, and homeownership is up, but minority Hispanics are behind, and I couldn't relate to what it's my day to day because not only that's my niche. I specialize in processing for Spanish speaking, Portuguese speaking clients. So not only that's my niche, and when you think of that, you would think first time home buyers. And that's not my reality because I have tons of investors that we do loans with that they are on the fifth transaction back to us and they are not in the category of the headline. So where's that coming from really? Because my reality is not showing that. I know I'm a small fish, but I don't agree with it.
And I think that as you look at those, right? So I'm looking at, there were some articles that I shared before. One was, United States population more racially, I don't know, it's more diverse than it was in 2010. And the other one has that minorities are lagging behind in home ownership. If you go in and look at it and say like, how many years has the family been in the country? If you're a fourth generation, like the chance of owning a home as a fourth generation, then somebody that's been here for 10 years, it's completely different. It's like hard to compare apples to apples. And then when you start looking at, by that, so you've got like Asians own a lot of homes. They make up 5% of the US population. But if you look at their education level, right, they came here to get, advanced college degrees. So it's not even like, if you were to lump them into people with PhDs that own homes in the US, like I don't know that there would be a massive gap. So it's hard to equate. The news headlines like to make it seem more divisive maybe than it is. And that's why I said before, like, I think it's very funny that you link anything with like low and high income because, right, I grew up in northern Michigan where, the average household income is like $46,000. Like most of the kids in school get reduced or free lunch from school, right? So like they're just poor people. It didn't matter what color you were. There was just a lot of poor people, and you didn't have kids with 7 different versions of Air Jordans, right? Like they got a pair of shoes for school, and that's what they wore, right? So I guess I just didn't grow up. I just grew up with like I just didn't even know any different. You just grew up and you just lived and. You just were happy to like play with baseball and do stuff. But so one thing that I think is something that, and this I've experienced and kind of seen, is there a massive difference in credit? Like we are so heavily tied to like credit scores here, like those kind of things. Is there an equivalent in foreign countries? Because it's a little bit of a racket here, but that's beside the point. Is there an equivalent? Is it something that they even talk about, know about? Like, how does that work?
No, the education in Brazil, it's again, I don't know, like nowadays, but it's not. We don't talk about that. Actually, it's the opposite. You are not supposed to have debt. The success of your financial life is when you pay everything cash. And most of the Hispanic other countries have the same mentality. So
Yeah.
definitely it's something that they face when we are in a process of a mortgage, because people just want to pay everything off, and rather our system here, you are valued by the amount of debt
Yeah.
that you have and how consistent you are with your payments. You cannot do that with cash.
Just over the last maybe 3 years ago, maybe Brazil just introduced a credit score.
Yeah.
Okay.
They didn't even have credit scores. It's just their social security number. But that's another weird thing there. You go to the grocery store and you get, some milk, some bread, some whatever, and you give them your social security number, and now you're on a payment plan for those groceries. You make
Interesting.
monthly payments.
It's not quite like that. You can get like points, and if you do like your
What's that called again?
your ticket, and so yeah,
What's that called again?
CPF.
Yes.
Yeah, what she said. So
So one more thing with that. So that's one thing that I see a lot when I get buyers with my Latino clients. A lot of them have a blank credit report because they do not open lines of credit. They do not finance stuff. They, like she said, the way that their countries operate is to, if you can't afford it, you can't pay for it cash, you can't buy it. So we get that, and a lot of people have been here, 10, 15, 20 years, no credit, or they have a Home Depot card for like $300. So um, they're still living, that way of not going into debt, only paying cash, which, as you know, makes the loans different. If you have a no credit score, you're going to go, if you can go FHA, they see it as a 580. It's a high interest rate. It's going to cost
right.
points. Or if it's a non-QM loan, it's 25% down, higher interest rate. So there's loans out there, but they're not as good as if you have credit.
Well, my next thing here is I have on here assets, mattress money, banking. I think you touched on that a little, but cash is a lot more prevalent as you come from those, different countries. Like they value what you can actually buy and pay
Yeah.
for. Do you have to do much coaching with your clients?
Absolutely. And I actually
Oh, yeah.
had my notes in here because not only for me, yesterday I was talking with my team and I was like, hey, what was the pitfalls of our loans? Like if we can tell. And the cash handling is so difficult. Whether it's deposits that are made, inconsistent deposits, and the instruction that they have on how really to handle your finances. So most of the clients that we dealt have a lot of cash. And when we're talking about six figures deposits in cash, and in my mind, I was like, how do you have that in your house? How do you not have a plan or whatever it is for that? And when it gets to us, the processors, and then you're already under contract, and then your 30-day contract, it's not 30 days because the banks are not open on the weekends, and then you're struggling to be resourceful and how to track those funds. So definitely the way the buying the house doesn't start when you get pre-approved. I feel like it starts before, and whoever you work with, whatever you get your information from, it really matters because that can be detrimental to your process. That can be a success to your process. And when it gets to us in processing, sometimes it might be too late for depending on what you want to do. I don't know if that was your question, but cash is the top
Yeah,
like
especially
10 problem that we have.
yeah, and one of the things I run into a lot up front, because I get everything that I can up front. Um, they pay verifications of rent. You have the clients that are self-employed and they're getting dealt with cash, and they're handing their landlord $1,000 on the first of the month. And some lenders, like when we're doing I-10 loans, depending on where their credit score falls, it's 20% down, but if we can't do a 6-month BOR, it changes to 25% down. So then hey, you got to know that up front, right? Because if you submit a loan at 20% down and it changes to 25% down, that can cause a big problem. Um, so paying rent in cash, not saving money in the bank, saving it at home, that is a very big thing that I get. And one of the ones that, just because of the way I am, this one irks me, is not having a separate personal and business bank account. Like running a very successful business with thousands of dollars coming in and out every other day, but it's just the person's name, not LLC, not a company name. Husband and wife might be on it. Sometimes there's a husband and a cousin that's on it, and it's their personal account. You see the Zelle transactions coming in from, family or whatever, sending money home for something, and you have all of the business deposits coming in and out, and contractors being paid, and the utility bill for their home. So, yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I once had a client years ago that showed up at a closing with like $115,000 cash, and this was like 2001. So and he had no, like, could not understand why you wouldn't. Why wouldn't they want? This is way better than any other kind of money. This is cash. Needless to say, that closing took a few extra days to get closed. So again, just anybody watching, if you are, in an area when you're dealing with clients of different ethnic, backgrounds, wherever that may be, understand that there's different customary banking practices, things that are standard. Like, they may be coming from a country where keeping money in the bank was, like I just saw some stuff, I think it's Venezuela, where people are being arrested there, like their assets are being seized because they're in opposition to the new political regime.
Yep.
Well, you don't put your money in a bank in a country like that. Right? Like the last place you're going to put it when they can come and take it. So understand, if you're dealing with people, just people are people that come from different places. They have different customary customs, and you've got to get ahead of that to fit maybe at sometimes a round peg into a square box that is our lending world. So maybe even your messaging on, social media, different kinds of things, just getting that word out there. I think we don't do a good job as an industry of helping people understand these things. Like, it's very hard to find mortgage calculators. Actually, MGIC has one that are done, and maybe they're out there, that are done in in Spanish or in Portuguese or different places for them to get information readily from some of those those big websites and places. So
yeah, and there is a lot of misinformation as well. So you breaking those misinformation, and especially in the broker world, that it's not a bank. So sometimes although I mentioned about the cash deposit, believe it or not, we have a way to accept. We have a bank that accepts $30,000 cash, and we can do that. And then we get to us, people were like, well, you cannot do that. Like, we work with this. This is our our everyday situation. So when you are not from a country and then you come in America and you want to buy a house, it's very important where you're getting your source of information. It's crucial, because there are a lot of people that not that don't know things, but they only know what they know. And it's the same with us. We might not know a lot of other things, but it's just you're talking about a house. It's not a shoe. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you wanted to be able to have a proper information. And that starts with your CPA, tax preparers. It's a huge thing that we have problems all the time. And professionally speaking, it's something that bothers me so much when I'm dealing with, we have a mutual client and we are both working with this mutual client to buy a house. And people barely have emails, don't communicate, don't understand. And I'm like, how are you preparing someone else's taxes? Like, I just don't get it. But there's just a side note because we do that so much, and then an information from a tax person or a lot of realtors give a lot of wrong information about lending. And then that can be detrimental for the whole process. So I feel like if each one of the people involved stay in their lanes and maybe just try to understand, but why is that? The better thing that you can do is to just ask questions. But why is this being handled different? Because when you know more information, for us real estate professionals, you can make more money and help more people. And for the client, you can secure the chance of you buying a house because you're better informed. And my mission, John, and I have a very funny story, but I'm not gonna bring into it. It's just like I'll resume. I bought some custom curtains, and I don't understand anything about those. They have, and I speak a good English. I I know that I'm not,
Easy.
so illiterate,
Easy.
but I got this curtains. It was so expensive, and the lady at the end, I didn't like it. She said that I couldn't replace, and obviously I couldn't. And then I go back to her and I was like, hey, but you said I could have changed. And she was like, no, you misunderstood me. And I'm like, no, you said it. No, you were missing, and the tone that she said, and I feel so, and then I was like, and then I started questioning myself, and I was like, no, I know I understood what she said. And then I reflect that I'm a person that I feel I think a lot. And then afterwards, I was like, maybe sometimes that's how a client may feel with a transaction. If it's Spanish or Portuguese or whatever language it is, if they're buying a house, my my personal thing is that we're gonna sit down, you have questions, we're gonna go each one of them and you're gonna understand. And if I cannot communicate, we're gonna get someone. But just treating people like with respect and understanding that they're never gonna buy anything more expensive than that. So my job is, I'm not a loan officer, but I know a lot of what I do. So if I can explain to you why I need that bank statement, I'm gonna do properly, and not, it's just not an email. We're gonna call and like, hey, this is, do like step by step so you understand. And customer servicing and mortgages, this is so important because that makes your transaction so much easier, and it's already very stressful. When a client, I'll tell you by our clientele in here, when they got to us, they already received thousands of emails and phone calls. And I work with the computer, so I'm on my email every day. I know how to read an email and reply quickly. Someone that's working in a hospital, in a construction field, mechanic, like you're not paying attention to that. I cannot rely on that. I have to call you. I have to explain. We use WhatsApp for everything. I have to make sure that you understand what I need, why is it important, what that can cause a delay on your transaction. Uh, that's the service level that I myself and the processors that work with me, we strive to do, because it's very stressful. Getting a mortgage is not something is very easy. It's very invasive. Some people don't like to reply some questions that feel very personal, and you have to have a very professionalism to handle those things.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest problems I see with communication just across the board is that we believe it occurred when it really didn't. right? Like it was you
Yeah.
telling them something and they didn't comprehend it. And I can only imagine it coming to me in maybe not my native language or something like that, where I already am a little bit more intimidated by it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like a pain in the butt, so like you're already coming at it kind of just from an insecure, intimidated place. And now you've got this person kind of talking down to you. Did I make a mistake? Is it my problem? Did I do something wrong? So maybe a little bit of gaslighting there. And I can definitely see the lending world doing that, right? Like blaming you as the consumer for not doing it. Which I think is one of the things that, right, like all of my conversations with you have always been, I've always had a sense that you genuinely care about the client, not because, right, but because you are the client, right? Like you put yourself in their shoes and, right, like I've never had a experience with you where like you were always seeking to understand, making sure that things were very well explained. So I just, it's commendable, right? What you guys do, you do a lot of business for a reason. So
Yeah,
that's,
no, and it's especially, I don't know, it's just like I feel like oh, we're humans, my brain. Like this is just work for us, right? And we're gonna get over this life one day. Why not while you are here and you're working and you're really connecting with someone, and especially with bank statements. So there was one thing in processing that I prefer to explain, I don't know, nuclear things than ask for this, the transaction history on your bank. This is very challenging for people to get. And I can imagine my mom getting a mortgage and someone asking that for her. There is no fucking way that she's gonna get that. Like, no way. Just forget about it. We're facing timing the client. So like I have my WhatsApp on my computer, so we're just like facing timing. Hey, go in here, yes, and then there is a word in Spanish that I love, which is corazón. I feel like it sounds so well, and some like afterwards you close on the loan and someone says corazón, thank you so much for helping me. Here's the house and sending the pictures and everything. This means the world. I feel like and the money comes with it because you're just like you're happy to do it and you do it right and you do it correct and the success is just a consequence.
well, I think that this, you're definitely fulfilling a niche. You're doing it from a, place of empathy, a place of, right, understanding, coming at it from a, some people may gravitate there because there's easy money to be made or nobody's doing it or whatever it may be. But I think you guys are there for the right reason, helping the right people. And yeah, I just think it's great. So if people have loans in those states that, and I just a suggestion I would make, if you've got somebody and you've got the loan and you can get them with a third party processor that actually understands one, the product that you're selling, right? So don't give your third party processor that's never done a DSCR loan, a DSCR loan because they're going to mess it up.
Yeah.
Understand what you're doing yourself and try and match up your client with wherever you're sending them. So if they are in the Carolinas, Florida, Texas, and they want a third party processor, they can actually get you to process their loan.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
See that? So I'll get like wherever you're seeing this from me, I'll get all of Simple Processing Connect, like all the information you need to get over there. And then anything else like, and Larry writes loans in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida.
Those are the three that I'm licensed in for residential, for primary, and but I do DSCRs in like 40 something states.
So I'll get any of their contact info, and I know we went over on our time and I thank you guys for being here still. Anything that you would say, like just a parting word for somebody that's out trying to originate loans for, Hispanic, Latino, whatever, like any type of ethnicity, maybe that's other than, their own. Is there like a tidbit or just something that you would have like, just do this outside of just like be a good person and treat everyone the same?
So that's kind of what I was going to start with, was like, do it for the right reasons, don't think that it's this untapped market that you can go and exploit for your own benefits. you're dealing with people that are new to this country that's been here for a handful of years, first generation, left everything that they know to be here. Treat them with the respect that they deserve. Don't look at them as money signs, a way for me to come up and do good. And like it really bothers me when I run into lenders that try to tap into this market. Um, I've had some talking to me at an event. They didn't even know I was a lender. And they're like, oh, yeah, I'm trying to get into the Spanish market, man. It's so easy. It's just 12 bank statements, send it off to the lender. That loan's getting denied every time. I guarantee you it, because it's not that easy. Especially like we said, when we're dealing with a lot of cash transactions. But they're 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 not a they're not like a just a thing. Like I don't like to say that they're niche because they're not a niche, but it's like you're dealing with humans too. Like you got to care about them as well. I care that I am helping, that I'm able to help um an ethnicity of people, an underserved group of people, a marginalized group of people become like out of that bracket that they're placed in, the Latino low income. Those two things are two, one's an ethnicity, one's like a social whatever. Like they're not hand in hand. Like if you're Latino, it does not automatically mean you're low income. So I just man, I can just ramble on about how I feel about this.
You just see it. I mean, it's headline grabbing, right? I mean, that's what it is.
But I guess
like
my main thing is just to just be respectful, treat them with the same way you would treat your family. Don't look at them as a way for you to get money. Think about how you're setting them up and how that's going to affect, how it's going to positively affect their family generations from now.
Thais, anything you would add as far as on the processing side, things that I know you said WhatsApp, and I think that that's wonderful. Now, do you do like FaceTime type stuff inside
all
WhatsApp?
the time. And iPhone actually have an awesome feature, which you can share your screen while you're on the phone. So that has been all the clients like, hey, let's do FaceTime. And then you just switch to share your screen and we guide them to just sign disclosures. It's hard for some clients to just sign the disclosures. Well, for me, I deal with Larry and I deal with several other loan officers, several other companies. Really and that's not Latino, Hispanic, just as a professional, how thorough the loan officer is up front, just collecting a accurate application that changes everything in the process, and that makes it even easier or harder. I have dealt with several good LOs and not so good LOs, and when you're again no matter what type of clientele, but if someone has a deposit online, it's buying a house, you should do your job properly and you should be professional. We expect that from someone that's handling thousands of dollars. At least you're checking emails, you're replying, you have your stuff in order to be able to generate loans. That's my take out.
Well, I think that customer service goes a long way. Always remember that just because you believe communication happened, it didn't. The more personal you can be with somebody, understanding where they're coming from, because everybody comes from, nobody comes to us in the exact same spot. So our job, I just think as lenders as a whole, is to meet them where they're at and provide them what they need to take them to where they're going. And it's different for every single human. So just understand that and just treat people fairly. I do believe though that, I see as things are moving, and I think that one of the best things that's happened, more and more people are becoming brokers. they have a much greater vested interest in being able to do well for their clients. And a lot of people would say a product wasn't available, and they tell somebody you can't buy a house. Well, you couldn't buy a house with their bank, but it didn't mean you couldn't. So I think now just there's more and more brokers, independent thinkers out there in the lending world that are just doing a little bit better job. I think that the consumer is ultimately winning. So I think that all of those things are good. Well, I truly appreciate your guys' time. I thank you, and you keep doing what you're doing. You guys are definitely making an impact and doing well. And I know you guys can find Larry on Facebook as well. Now, do you have are you anywhere?
I am on Facebook. I'm just not too active, but yeah, I'm on the Facebook and.
Well, I will include some links for that. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Keep doing what you do.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys have a great day. Hey, if you're still here and you're watching this, you're probably getting something from our content. If so, maybe you know, or I'm sure you know, someone else that could also benefit. So if you could do us a solid, forward this, share it with your friends, other people that are like-minded that want help with simple solutions to grow their business. And if you want to do a little bit of a deeper dive someplace on here, there is a place to schedule a call with us to talk about your business and how we can grow it together. Look forward to hearing from you. Again, thank you for being here. Please do share.